Welcome to Philosophy15. I'm Scott Aiken.
And I'm Robert Talese.
We are two philosophy professors at Vanderbilt University. These are 15-minute unscripted conversations about philosophy. We're the authors of Why We Argue and How We Should, Political Argument in a Polarized Age, and Pragmatism, Pluralism, and the Nature of Philosophy. That's a pretty modest title. Today, we are going to talk
We're gonna shift gears.
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna break our rule. We had been talking about the trouble withs, and we got a lot, and there's a lot of airing of grievances that's gone on so far in our trouble with series. But we were talking a little bit, and we're like, look, let's do the cynics. But instead of doing the trouble with the cynics,
because that was too easy. That's too easy. It's too easy.
In praise of the cynics.
In praise of the cynics.
In praise of the cynics. So, Rob,
we've
got not just defend them, praise them. So let's get the view out, because that's what that's what these programs are generally committed to. So let's start with just what's the cynic program?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
We're here to praise,
but let me give a stab at it. Maybe,
okay.
By the way, maybe that's its virtue. Maybe that's one of the things to be praised. Okay. So I take it that this is at least close to the core, if not the core, of the Cynic philosophical program. It is the insistence, the relentless insistence on fixating on the moral failing of everything around you.
That's exactly it.
Right? So cynicism is the view that the world around you is inevitably is falling short of decency, let alone goodness. That fact itself has to be the core of your comportment towards everything.
Yes. Moreover, a good deal of our standard human relations is committed to obscuring that fact.
Good. That's right. So cynicism then is a moral program, right? It is the moral program that says, don't succumb to that.
That's right.
Be at war with everything around you, even the stuff that looks okay, because you've got good inductive reason to think that the stuff that looks okay is a mere smiley face that you are accustomed to placing on what in fact is irrevocably depraved.
So let's think of some examples. Let's bring out.
Does that seem right?
That seems dead right to me. And moreover, and one last feature of this, because at the very least, in it being enacted, what seems to define it are, again, you might say denials and the kind of opt-out elements, and the disruption elements. Those are the two. You might say there's the positive and the negative. It's unclear which one is the positive, but one element
refusal.
Is the refusal. I'm not going to participate.
Yeah,
and I'm going to disrupt.
Yes,
right.
I like it. I like it already.
So the not participating usually takes the form of not holding social offices. It's unclear whether or not the family element is in there. Crates and Hipparchia looks like they at the very least get married. Doesn't look like they had children though. So maybe there's an
antinatalism might be part of the package.
It's like a little chorus there. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So a kind of antinatalism, and so significant minimalism with regards to possessions. Arguably a form of vegetarianism.
Yep.
It does sound sometimes like Diogenes did eat some meat. One story is that he died of eating raw octopus, but maybe they didn't think it was meat. I don't know.
But he might have been doing that only to disgust other people.
Right.
Yeah.
There might have been something performative about that. There's also a story that he also held his breath until he died, which is also highly performative and maybe awesome.
Totally awesome.
So that's, you might say, the denial. And at the very least, those last two look like they're also part of this disruptive program. The disruptive program looks like it takes the form of him walking backwards in the middle of crowds. It looks like him sort of disrupting public ceremonies, certainly going after public figures. Demosthenes, and Diogenes very famously was would regularly touch Demosthenes with his left hand, which was the toilet hand, and with the bad finger, like would touch his food apparently. So like the Diogenes Laertius interpretation is the reason why Demosthenes would retreat inside the inn when Diogenes would come around, was because Diogenes would try to touch his food with his toilet hand, and he would try to get as many people in between him and Diogenes as he could. That's
awesome.
Okay. So we have the refusal and the disruption. Let's think about some of the challenges that have.
Let me just emphasize one thing. But both sides of the program, though, are driven by a moral insight. Well, by what's taken by them to be a moral insight, right? Okay. The Cynics are not merely just disruptive pains in the ass. They're not merely,
it's not a kind of nihilism,
right? And it's not a kind of 16-year-old broism, right? Like, I'm not going to join your party, kind of crap, right? It's that everything, you've got good reason, either strong inductive reason or just reason, explicit reason, to think that everything around you is devoted to something depraved and to hiding depravity.
That's right.
From you. And so the stance of being at war with everything around you is the only possible moral posture.
It's not everything, but everything with regards to culture. It's not everything. So it doesn't look like Diogenes is at war with squirrels. Diogenes isn't at war with rocks. He's at war with a culture.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. So everything
around you, instead of physis.
Yeah,
right?
Good.
Right.
Well, but I don't know. Maybe biting into a raw octopus might have done that. Might have done something. So who knows what the boundaries are of that? But certainly, it's that the human world around you,
right,
is not only depraved but devoted to disguising its depravity.
Yes.
So, and the only moral stance to take about that, because you can't trust your own positive moral thinking because you're embedded in everything that's depraved. The only thing you can do is disrupt and reject.
Now, so there's a kind of an internal argument that in some ways is maybe a sort of, at the very least, from the causal traditional histories, we've got Diogenes, and then we have Crates, and then from Crates we've got Zeno, who was a Stoic. And the Stoics in some ways are the sort of, you might say, the housebroken
domesticated
cynics, the domesticated cynics. And the Stoic response is, one thing that we've learned from consistent Cynic critique is that it is ineffective. It is ineffective at actually changing anything. What has to be done is that you have to be changed inside, but be a participant in that world and stand up for the justices that you nevertheless see from the perspective. So there's a kind of an internal critique, which is, if you think that masturbating in the marketplace to show that you can, to show just how autonomous that you can be, and to supposed to break the sexual mores of your society, is actually going to disrupt any of that, you are in error. This is the ineffectiveness argument of cynicism. And the Stoic response was, the only way that you can change this is by way of small incremental steps of reform. And the Stoics said, look, you have to participate. If you want to stand up for justice, you can't be standing on the outside shouting like a crazed person. Why? Because that is too easily ignored and actually doesn't wield any power of criticism. Demosthenes changed no view. Demosthenes only retreated inside his inn to get away from Diogenes. The only way to make these changes is to have the right kind of ethical insight, but to nevertheless participate as a reformer.
But couldn't what if the Stoic, what if the Cynic rather just said, practical considerations about what it takes to reform are all very well and good, but they are really mere rearrangings of the decks on the Titanic, of the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, because human societies are irretrievably depraved. You can achieve a little bit of better or worse, but within such a small range that even at its best, the world around you is disgusting and should disgust you.
And so to participate in it, in fact, will distort your judgment. Because
That's right.
this is you might call it the Seneca reductio of Stoicism. You're like, yeah, you thought that you were going to be able to change things from the inside. You talking in Nero's ear. How'd that go, big guy? Oh, and by the way, you own a lot of land and you eat too much. So that internal criticism of cynicism has got a kind of problem, which is, you might say, the more you participate, if you concede the Cynic's challenge, but say we've got to find a more effective path forward, the Cynic response is, no, the more you participate, the worse it actually distorts your judgment.
Right, or even thinking that there is a path forward that could be effective in any normatively relevant sense is itself to succumb to the disguise of all the way in which depravity disguises itself. I
have another challenge. So
okay.
I think that's a kind
of.
By
the way, I think I've just convinced myself that I'm a cynic.
I hope that we can continue. I hope that you can still be friends with your Stoic counterpart here. So here's a consistency challenge then. And this is in terms of how cynicism is again enacted, because we have the refusal but then the disruption element. Now, one of the elements to this is that if the Cynic were to really be a refuser, the Cynic would not stay in a city. The Cynic would refuse to stay in the city. The Cynic would refuse to participate whatsoever and not beg and not benefit from any of these things. The Cynic says that they want nothing to do with society and can hold it in contempt, but can't be anywhere else. So we have Diogenes, nevertheless, living in a city that he holds in contempt and finds all of the things that it produces to be garbage, but nevertheless eats the garbage. He nevertheless drinks the wine of those who make the wine. He nevertheless eats the finest bread and cakes that they produce. And he even says that, and many of the Cynics had even said that that withholding from these things from themselves actually increases their pleasure in them. So it looks like the Cynic, in sticking around to be a critic of the city and a disruptor of the city, still falls prey to this problem that was charged of the Stoics.
I don't think so. I think that kind of criticism of the Cynic embeds the assumption that drinking wine is good, that living in the city is good, that all of these things are good. By living in the city, by drinking the wine, by taking in all of the barely disguised trappings, not civilization, the pantomime, the mimicry of civilization, the mockery of valuable things, the Cynic all the more drives his point home.
So when Diogenes collects the coppers to be able to buy, we have the story of that the rich person saying, "Oh, Athens is really expensive," and he says, "Oh no, you can live on pretty much nothing in Athens. You just collect a few coppers and then you can buy some millet seeds and drink some water and you're fine. Athens is really inexpensive." Whenever he does that, on the one hand, it's a criticism of those who think that they need all this other stuff. But even when he eats the millet with the coppers, there's a kind of an irony to it all, or what is the attitude that he has when collecting the coppers and eating the millet seeds? That the cynic is never a farmer. The Cynic killed no deer to make his pouch. The Cynic has no kiln to make his cup.
So all of those examples, he's not a farmer. He's not. Rest on the assumption that there is some escape from the intrinsic failedness of the world around you. And so it begs the question.
It begs the question. But in some ways, then, so if there's no escape from the intrinsic failedness of this, then it looks to me, then again, the Stoic response is the better response, which is you have, at the very least, the possibility of mitigating that failure.
Not to any significant degree.
It looks like the Cynic makes no, right? So it's like there's at least a little bit. Don't you have an obligation to try? Don't you have an obligation to participate in a way that actually does its, again, can't make it better, but can make it less bad?
Not if the degree to which it's made less bad is insignificant.
So better to
serve as the reminder publicly to everyone around you that it's all bullshit than to trick yourself into thinking that by making it a little bit less bullshitty, you've made an improvement.
That you've swallowed. That's yet more bullshit.
That's right. Philosophy15, folks.
That was awesome.